Well, hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma. I'm Nick, and today we are diving into part 2 of all the things around your emotions.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set. Well, hello, Kisma.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm also fantastic.
Talking about emotions, continuation of that emotional conversation.
It's maybe ironically, it's a topic that I'm really passionate about.
Why is that ironic?
Because passion is a strong emotion.
Duh. All right. Check back in, Kisma.
How's your week?
My week is good, just meeting with my gorgeous clients, working on creating a new training, and getting ready to go to New York City to be in the energy mastery field.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to be there with you.
Yeah, you're going to be there too.
Yeah, I'm going to be there too. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole big powwow.
Whole big powwow.
Very excited about that. Mm-hmm. Never been to the Big Apple before.
Oh, it's going to be quite the experience for you.
No, it can't be. I mean, it can't be worse than India.
No.
I mean, India was
New York's fabulous.
Pretty intense for a person like me.
New York is fabulous.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Mm-hmm. And everybody I've ever told, they know that I've traveled like all over the world and done different things like that. And they're like, how have you never been to New York? Mm-hmm. And I honestly feel like I feel a little bad about it, or
you can fix that.
Yeah, I can't wait to say that I've been, and see the whole thing. So we're talking about emotions. And if you missed the last episode, then I would say stop right now
and go back
and go back and listen to it, because we're talking about really two sides of the coin. In the last episode, we really talked about why it can create some really big challenges in your life when you give your emotions too much importance.
Oh, yeah. Shakespeare play
just waiting to happen. But really, he does depicts so beautifully what happens when just one of those emotions really takes over and starts to guide somebody's life and make all of their decisions for them, and it just destroys everything around them.
Right.
And he does it in such an artful way. Romeo and Juliet and their passion and their, that deep, quote unquote love for one another, and then before you know it, everybody's dead.
Yeah,
it's just like. What?
Yeah.
So
derailed.
Don't do that. But that's what happens when the emotion becomes all important.
Right.
And in this episode, we're talking about the whole flip side of that, which I think is something a little bit more with our generation, where it's like, well, your emotions really don't matter.
That's not fair either.
Much. And that's not fair, and it's not productive either. So what we did start to wrap up with in the last episode is that idea that, well, you actually can be really successful. You can achieve some amazing goals and not take your emotions into any account for that.
People do that all the time.
People do it all the time. And then you get there and it's like, wait, what? And when you've repressed that much emotion for that long, it's really hard to feel like, oh, I've arrived. Well, to have that really fulfilling feeling.
Yeah, there's an absence of joy, an absence of appreciation. There's just everything's been stuffed in, and the will goes into full speed ahead.
And it's like, well, now what's next? Okay. So this is kind of a fascinating topic, I think, because now when we flip into this other side of it, where it's like, okay, you're a human being. It's natural to have emotions. And when those emotions aren't given any credence, when they're continually stuffed back, stuffed down, and repressed, that will eventually take a toll on the health
Yes, correct.
Because it's a lot of energy, meant much of it quite negative, because those are the ones that were typical to repress, that just gets stuck into the body and stuck into the cells, and then creates and manifests a different kind of challenge in the physical body.
Right.
So that's kind of what I want to unpack in this episode, and really look at from some different angles. Again, I think it's really helpful to look at it in context of goals. And I'm wondering, from your experience as a performer, you're great. You were a great performer. You had a wonderful career as a musician. And I know that through that, there was an evolution of you in order to continue to step into that. Like, how did you relate to that at that time? Like, if you were going to step on stage and you were feeling really crappy, what did you do about that?
I got over it. I mean, simply put, I just had to get over it. You can't leave 1,000 people in the audience waiting because you don't feel good.
So you created some urgency to get over it.
No, it's just okay, it's time to play, people. The show must go on. I mean, it's like performing. The show must go on.
The show must go on.
And you can sort of, then there might be a little drama afterwards, or it could be nerve-wracking too. Yeah, the beautiful thing is that even if something's going on, when you have a focus, something that's more important, those negative emotions don't matter so much because you're really focused on the ideal.
Right. Yeah. So that's the ideal that really gets you through. But you said something really interesting here, and that's the part that I kind of want to dive into. There's might be a little drama afterward or something like that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think, if one doesn't know what to do, you're just okay, I'm going to push this down and then walk on stage and play, or whatever it is. I'm going to plow through. I'm going to get through my day. And you don't really acknowledge or manage, it's going to come up. It's going to percolate.
It comes up in some other way.
Yeah. And it might not be, in the instance of performing, it might not be right after, but it could be in the martini that you have, later on when you go out, or it could be in a fight that you got with a friend or a boyfriend or whatever. I mean, these things come out in different ways, or they start to manifest in some physical issues.
Some physical form, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a really important part, when the emotions come up. Yeah, you have a job to do.
Right.
And I remember that myself. I remember one concert in particular. We were playing, it was a Baroque concert. So I'm playing my, high piccolo, very delicate things in a smaller orchestra, and I had 102-degree fever.
Ooh, nasty.
I called in ahead of time. I was it was a freelance job. I was man, I this is what's going on. This is where I'm at. And they're we have nobody. If you don't come in, that's it. And so I came in and I played the gig. And I think it was the same kind of thing. It was more just to the next piece, just to the next note, just to the next phrase or whatever that was that helped to keep me on track, and to do that, and that piece can be really important as far as seeing your way through, persisting, right? That sense of persistence, of just taking the next
perseverance,
step. Perseverance,
in a way, yeah.
Right. To let yourself get to the next step, to get to that ultimate success, which for me was just finishing the concert so I could go home,
go to sleep, right?
God knows what.
Yeah.
Drug myself and go to bed. But that was, it was really challenging. And I think a lot of people do that for a long time in their lives. So maybe not that severe where you're showing up with 102-degree fever or whatever, but where, okay, you're not inspired by your job.
Yeah.
And it just, it kind of sucks for you. And you just keep going through again and again and again. And nothing is really inspiring about it. And it's like a third of your life that is essentially just kind of a void.
Yeah.
So when somebody's in that sort of situation, what do you recommend? How do you recommend that they because there are emotions coming up around that. I got to myself, when I was in that situation, was some of the frustration or some of the disappointment or some of the just confusion, not sure about where it's going to go. There's a lot of things going on below the surface. What do you do about that?
Well, you're describing, someone that is uninspired and checked out for a part of their life, the job. But the fact is there's other things. There's things that we can contemplate, things that we can do, things that we can study that I feel will fill that void, even if what you're doing for your job isn't inspiring to you. I mean, if you can make it change, great, make it change. But let's say that you're not finding another job or you're not starting a business. There's something to read. There's something to contemplate. There's a higher ideal to go after to lift up the soul.
And I think one of those is the gratitude that you mentioned in the last episode too, of like, okay, well, this may not be my dream job, but look at all the amazing things that this is allowing me to do.
What can you do with the income or the structure, or the schedule of that job? And then, because, a lot of people listening to our podcast, they're building their own businesses. And I know as an entrepreneur, there are times you're like, oh, if I just went back to that, 9 to 5, and then I'd have all this freedom. It's like on one side or the other, right? So we have to know, like, what's the real thing that can inspire us, and to not allow emotions to be repressed or emotions to throw us off the rail, but stay in focus.
If you let that go long enough without really addressing and being honest with yourself, that you will check out.
Yeah, for sure.
You will 100% check out, because there's just no need to dive into any of that.
Right.
And that repression is something that I've seen where time and time again, it's just too big to deal with. It just seems too big to deal with. And so it's like, okay, well, on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And then you wind up with all this old emotional stuff. And one of the most common things that I hear, and maybe, I don't know if you've heard this with people that you've worked with, but one of the most common things that I've heard is, oh, I've dealt with that. That was years ago. I've dealt with that. And then all of a sudden, all these same patterns have been playing, they have the realization.
Karmic loop.
Yeah. It's been playing out in their lives for all that time that they thought that they had dealt with it. It just had kind of snuck below the surface.
Right.
And I think I truly think that that's actually a really dangerous place to play, because of what you said before, where, okay, you have an intense emotion, or you have something that was a pretty big deal.
Right.
It could have been, like we talked about, some kind of trauma or something like that. It could have been, really intense situation with a loved one, like whatever that was, that really triggered a lot of things. And then it gets stuffed below the surface.
Right.
That it's energy. It's energy that gets tucked down in there that is going to find a way out sooner or later.
Yeah, and it's going to get congested while it's tucked in there. It's going to get kind of wonky.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think you see really explosive emotion.
Yeah.
So that's where you see
definitely the volatility, intimidation, anger comes rising up, and then it starts getting directed to other people that happen to be around.
Well, that's the really sneaky part about it too, is then it becomes about the other.
Oh, totally. The blame or the self-pity or the,
It's like what they did, what somebody else did or didn't do.
Right.
How they acted or didn't act. And it becomes all about that thing. And it just is like the last place that you'd look is ever within yourself to be like, oh, that's pretty intense.
Right.
I wonder what was hanging out below the surface there that really triggered that. And then it's so easy to just break something from a place like that.
Completely break something, or break self, or break a relationship. So what do you recommend for someone who's been repressing?
Well, this is where it becomes really important. This is when the repression. Okay, let me back up for a second. In the last episode, we talked about, just making the emotions all important and really gaining a level of objectivity. That's a practice in motion. When you talk about dealing with a lot of repressed emotion and just having not dealt with those things for a long time, you do need a level of objectivity to that, but you do have to also take it in layers. Because I guarantee that if you then go all the way to that other side and just dive all the way in and make your emotions really important, there are going to be some disturbing things in there that you hadn't thought about in years or considered or didn't even know you were capable of.
You sound very scary.
But it's true. This is true. There are aspects in humans, especially people who have been holding on for a really long time, holding on really tight, that is very difficult to admit to yourself about, like, wow, that's there. And once you realize that, I think that first realization that, wow, that's been hanging out in me in a long time.
Awareness.
And driving a lot of my patterns. Well, one of the first things that you naturally would go to, this is a logical conclusion, is like, I need to eradicate that.
Get it up and out.
I need to solve all of that right now because I don't want to live like that anymore. Okay, well, that great idea. And if you try to solve all of that all at once, you're going to be back on the other side of the coin, way into the emotional drama and going way back into a whole bunch of stuff that isn't going to solve you or help you in your life.
Right. And oftentimes, I mean, I've done a lot of processes and personal growth and all that. Oftentimes they'll take you through a process that is just anything from screaming and hitting a mattress to breaking boards or whatever to supposedly get this up and out. And it might have felt good to do all that, yet it doesn't eradicate it all.
It feels good in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't really solve it.
Right.
And so I think what's really important is to have a measured way and a system to deal with that piece by piece and layer by layer, and to not, and this is important, to not make it about just all the healing, to direct it towards your higher goal, your higher path. And to come back to that higher path, that higher mission for your life, that higher calling, or just, something that you want to have and create in your life, to come back to that and then to solve those things as they come up.
Yeah. Well, for me, it always comes back to that awareness, to a choice, if we want to hang on to that, to the pivot, like there is a choice to let go. And if it's really deeply embedded, to do some work around that. And I just believe action's a real healer. When we act and we're in that consistent action on this planet, and when we don't let something like that derail us, we heal really fast, and we also heal the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Action as a healer. I've never heard you say that before.
I know. It just came to me.
That just
my
popped
little
out just right
effervescent
now.
self. Well, it's like we always do say, Swamiji is like, action is the insignia of life.
Yeah.
And we are walking, healing miracles. It's when we stop taking action, we get all stuck in things that we don't heal, or we cause bigger damage.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. Action is the insignia of life. Therefore, if you want more life,
you got to be in action.
Take more action. Yeah.
With awareness, though. It's not about, like we've been talking about, holding on to repressed stuff. It's really that awareness and a choice, and also being willing to, I think, always see outside the box. Just because someone says you've got years of work to unravel, it doesn't have to take years.
Right.
It's better done in a system. It's better done with support, yet it doesn't have to take years. And you don't need to solve the whole thing in order to be in action and successful right now or happy. You can begin to resolve things and yet still have happiness.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're bringing up a really important part of this whole conversation, which is like there are different sections of your life and different things, and not everything doesn't have to be perfect in order for you to get to that, to the ultimate goal.
Right.
Like if you go for the perfection, you're just going to be screwed right out of the box. It's just like, it's really, really hard to get there.
Right.
So you can take actions. If you've been feeling something for a really long time and you know that you have some traumas that you need to deal with, that doesn't mean that you can't have a really great life and achieve some really amazing things while you're still working your way through that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even be more rewarding.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings I've seen is I have to solve all my stuff before I can.
Right. Or like we were talking about the last episode, I have to feel a certain way.
Right.
Or I have to, it's just, it's a spiral that doesn't move upwards.
Yeah.
It keeps going in the quicksand.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, having that higher goal is a really important piece of it, but then working through it in layers.
Exactly.
So you keep your eye on the prize, whatever that is for you. It could be a huge goal. It could be a smaller goal. Like it doesn't matter. It's something that lifts you up.
Right.
It's an ideal for, like who you want to be and what the impact that you want to have in the world. Let that be that guiding principle. Right. And then how you stay out of the emotional stuff is basically like, okay, well, I have choice of action. You always have choice of action.
Totally.
I've got choice A, let's use a tangible example. You're not so healthy and you want to clean up your eating. Okay. Great idea. Clean up your eating, because poor diet is definitely not going to help your health.
Correct.
Okay, good. So now you want to eat healthy and have more vitality in your body. Wonderful goal. And you have option A, which is to have a healthy meal, a salad, or option B, which is
chocolate cake.
Okay. So which is going to get you to your goal?
The salad.
The salad's going to get you closer to your goal. Awesome. Now, what are you feeling around the chocolate cake? Disappointed, sad. I'm never going to be able to have anything good in my life again.
I kind of want that chocolate cake.
Right. But that's where the mind goes. And it's like, okay, well, you're making this choice and now it's bringing up some of these other things of like, I'm never going to be able to have anything good again, or I'm not going to be able to enjoy stuff.
Not
and
true.
the salad sucks and all this other kind of stuff. Okay, great. Now solve that stuff and go eat your salad. And you've just taken out one little chunk that'll get you to that highest place with a more ease. And how hard is that? Like, it's not hard at all, but it lets you get out of, and because that's the thing that a lot of people do is just will themselves into, a higher path, but then it becomes not sustainable because they never dealt with any of the stuff that they've been trying to avoid the whole time.
Exactly. Or eat the chocolate cake and just forgive yourself.
You could do that too.
And have the salad tomorrow. Chocolate cake can be very helpful. Let's just face it.
Okay, that's a good point.
I think it can be.
That's a good point.
I think if we really need the cake, we have to eat it and not beat ourselves up.
Well, because you kind of gotta ask yourself the question of, well, what's worse? Is eating the salad eating the cake and then shaming yourself for it?
No.
And going down that whole path of like, I feel so horrible about this and everything like that. Or eating the cake and being like, you know what? I'm really going to let myself enjoy this.
I love that chocolate cake.
But how many times do people like they indulge in something like that, but then they just heap so much shame and guilt all over it. And that's just like a whole other layer of it.
Yeah. Enjoy the cake. Just don't eat it every day, people.
Yeah. You got to make a wise choice about that. I don't know. That's a little suspect. It is a little suspect, but I get what you're saying there. And I think that's an important part of the conversation. Because what we're really talking about at the end of the day is like, you do have emotions. Those emotions do come up. Best to be able to handle those swiftly to keep yourself on track.
Exactly.
So that you don't get way derailed and so that you don't push down all these really important parts of yourself.
And one of the best ways is it's sort of like with a desire map, replace the lower emotions with the higher.
Yes.
Like, because I know we have some listeners who are like, well, but wait a minute, what about joy and gratitude and all that? Yes, like that's the whole... when there's a negative emotion, when there's a frustration and anger, replace it, keep moving, replace it, keep moving, have the awareness, have the choice, keep elevating.
Important also is those higher emotions can spin you out too. They can get way, way too out of control. And then you're like way like super, super, super overcharged. And that's going to have a consequence too.
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's true. That is true.
Yeah, not if they're real, not if they're truthful. I think people will posture that emotion. But I think if it's like true gratitude, doesn't mean you're spinning out.
Gratitude's a little bit different. Yeah. I think that's the exception to it.
You're talking about fever of like a high feverish emotion, celebration.
Yeah, like way over excitement.
Yeah. That no. When we're talking about a true deep
emotion.
Sense, yeah.
Yeah. And gratitude's one. I mean, how many of those are really worth, that depth, really exploring that depth? Love is one of them. Gratitude is one of them. Devotion is one of them.
Yeah. That will keep one out of the lower vibe and in the higher vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. And it lets, it does what I've found is that it lets those lower things start to arise so that they can be let go of.
Exactly.
It lets them release. It lets them let go.
Release is a good word.
Yeah. So that they can just, they can be solved. And then once they're out, they're out, you solve them when they're out.
So a couple tips for our listeners.
Well, number one is if you've been brought up with the idea that your emotions don't matter, it's really important to explore that And don't go so far over to the other side that they become the all important everything.
Right.
However, do recognize that your emotions actually do matter.
Yes.
Because they're reflective of something that's happening inside of you that can be hurting you in ways that you might not understand, or just derailing you and making things harder. So it's recognizing that your emotions actually do matter to a degree. Yeah. We just don't want to let them really get out of hand.
Run the show.
Yeah, and really run the show. Like there has to be, it's not about having the head always run the show or anything like that. It's more about those having a happy conversation and everybody being in agreement. That's kind of how I think about that. So that's one, is recognizing that your emotions actually do matter. And when they arise, it's worth it to look at it. You might not be able to deal with it in that moment. Like many times, you would have had to get on stage when you just weren't feeling it or had some other drama going on in your life. Okay, cool. Going to put that on the back burner for just a moment while we go do what we need to do. But if you leave it on the back burner forever, then you have a problem.
Yeah, you have that pan that's got all that stuff caked on it, won't come off.
Exactly. So you do need to come back to that and to really look at that, at what comes up, and to solve it and deal with it in whatever way that you do. That's why we use energy mastery and some of the tools that we have, is because it solves those things very, very efficiently. It solves the energy behind the emotion, right? The energy of the emotion, rather than trying to process through it.
Exactly.
So that's a really important piece. And then to recognize too, if you have had something happen in your life that has been traumatic, and you know that you have some lingering things around there, no, you got to be honest with yourself for one. Is that, okay, that's there, and that's likely affecting my life in ways that I don't understand.
Yeah.
I've never seen it not
Truth. Yeah.
affect people's lives in ways that they don't understand. So it's really just having an honest conversation with yourself, like, okay, do you really want to live like that?
That's a big question. Do you really want to live like that? And we pause and ask that question of ourselves. Yeah. It's a good one. It's a pivoter question.
It's really powerful. And then to find, get some help. We talked the last time about how coaching and mentorship, when you're dealing with emotions that are heavy like that, you're going to want some help. You're going to want somebody with some really, really, really good tools. Right. Whether that's us or somebody else who's super, super skilled in that kind of a thing, whatever that is. But because it's just too difficult, I would say, too difficult and too close to the chest to be able to really be objective to that yourself.
Sometimes, it's like any problem when we're in it. Oftentimes we can't see the solution. And so if repressed emotion is taken over, it's creating a problem. And we need that external view. Yeah.
And it does get super thick. Like it gets really thick and difficult to weed through that on your own. So having somebody that can hold you accountable and ask you some difficult questions and hold a space for you that's really healing is very powerful.
I would venture too to say one of the biggest is self-forgiveness.
Yes.
Because when we're holding on repressed emotions or whatever, forgive. And that self-forgiveness and forgiving other people, there will be an immediate healthy release with that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm so glad you said that, because that is actually really important, is like, there's kind of that moment where, oh, geez, boy, I've been doing this for a really long time. Like, what's wrong with me?
That
I haven't done this, or I should have done this a long
Right.
time ago, and some of that regret and stuff.
Right.
Man, that self-forgiveness just goes so far.
It really
to
does.
letting go some of those things.
Yeah.
So any kind of forgiveness. One of my favorites is the miracle prayer. It's from A Course in Miracles. I'm not read the whole thing, but I did grab that miracle prayer out of there because I thought it was really, really powerful. It's, I must have decided wrongly because I'm not at peace. And I'd like to be at peace, and I can decide differently. So if you Google that, you'll find
That's
it.
great.
But it's a really powerful thing that helps to get you back into.
Yeah, let's put that in the show notes.
Yeah,
too.
I have a decision to make. I can do something differently, and I do have an opportunity to forgive myself. That becomes a really important part of it.
Love it.
Because at the end of the day, emotions are so powerful for really connecting with other human beings. really feeling seen and heard and valued.
Alive, feeling alive.
And if you have a message that you want to share with people, connecting with that on an emotional level is where there is some very, very powerful impact.
Right.
And so it's important to have access to that part of yourself because it helps you to be full and whole and happy and beautifully human in this world.
Right.
It can be, I think, scary sometimes to weed through some of the old stuff. But rest assured that it's totally doable. And on the other side of that is an openness and a willingness to really engage with the world in a whole different way and to engage with your fellow humans in a whole different way that will bring so much more love and light into the world.
I help everyone.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that's the other side of the coin there.
Lift it up, everyone. Do your absolute best. Reach out if you need some support. info@sourcemovement.com.
We're right here for you. Thanks, everybody. Peace.
Namaste. Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.